Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started now. So welcome everyone to EBRC Student and Postdoc Association's workshop on applying to graduate programs. So I am going to be your host for today. My name is Ross. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the University of British Columbia. I work on manufacturing T-cell therapies from iPSCs, and in my past life, in my PhD at MIT, I worked on mammalian synthetic biology and sort of more specifically control of gene expression with like feedback controlled genetic circuits. So I'm going to let each of our moderators / panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get into a brief slideshow, and then we'll be doing a breakout session, and then there'll be time for questions at the end. I will describe the agenda in more detail shortly. Why don't we start off with Kaitlin?
Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Kaitlin Dailey, or Kate. I work in engineering biology of bacteria with natural anti-cancer capacity, so using genetic engineering to make them better or to fine-tune their safety for use, particularly against solid-state tumors. I'm at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and I am a research instructor. So that is the step at my institution between a postdoc and an assistant professor.
I'm up. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name's John Doctor. I'm a second-year PhD student at the University of Colorado, Boulder. I work primarily on modeling synthetic biological risk in the environment. So functionally writing code all day to figure out what's going to happen if something that's engineered gets released into the environment.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gianna. I'm a fourth-year bioengineering PhD student at Penn. I'm working on heterogeneity and drug resistance in melanoma, so looking at why certain populations of cells have sensitivities and others don't.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ice. I'm originally from Thailand. I did my PhD at University of Washington. I was co-advised by James Carruthers and Jesse Thornton. So being co-advised is like an interesting kind of like track as well. But I just started my postdoctoral work at MIT just like 2 months ago, working with Jim Collins on. So far, I'm trying to work on microbial engineering. I've been trying to use that for the application on bioproduction, like making chemicals so far, using some CRISPR tools. Now I'm shifting to more towards like the biomedical application.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So as you can see, we all have various ages, and some of us were much more recent in our applications. And so they'll probably have a bit better perspective than us old people in the panel session at the end. But nevertheless, we'll all try to provide our perspective from our sort of diverse array of current positions for applications. Okay, so in today's sort of workshop, we're going to start off with a short slideshow where we're going to break down the typical components of an application, and we're going to deep dive on the statement of purpose, because this is probably the key thing that you're going to have a lot of questions about, and the key messages that you want to get across in your statement of purpose. We're then going to do a breakout session led by our workshop moderators here, where we're going to walk you through an activity to help you with building these messages into your statement of purpose, and then also taking a look at some examples of how to target your application to different schools or programs through these sorts of fit paragraphs, typically at the end of the statement. There will be a couple wrap-up slides, and then we'll get into our Q&A session, where you can ask us any questions that you have related to this application writing or other aspects of applying to graduate programs. And so as we go through, fellow moderators, I forgot to mention, please feel free to jump in at the end of the slide if you have something to add, because I am certainly not going to be comprehensive here. Okay, so grad applications 101. I'll note that some of these information is based on the BE Application Assistance Program at MIT. So I would highly recommend to check that out. especially if you're applying to MIT, but even if not, there will be a link provided to this later. But also ICE, if you can find it real quick. Yeah. Okay, so applications can have a lot of components, and you might already be sort of in this process yourself of piecing together what to add, and it definitely can vary school to school in terms of what they're looking for, but typically the components are roughly the same. So the statement of purpose describing sort of what your research objectives and interests are, and your experience so far. The personal statement or diversity statement, sometimes it's one document or two, kind of talking more about your more personal background and what aspects of diversity you hope to contribute or have sort of experienced in the past. Those are much more common if you're applying to a program that does admissions at the department level. If you're applying directly to a lab, for example, this is very common at universities outside of the US and also at certain ones in the US, like Duke University. That's a popular one for people to apply to in biomedical engineering space. In that case, you're often going to be writing a cover letter directly to a research lab of choice. And so we won't talk about this in the workshop part, but happy to answer some questions about that. Since I'm in Canada, my current lab, we get these kinds of applications. And so I'm happy to provide some perspective on what it looks like for this more direct admission route. Some common elements will include things like a curriculum vitae or resume, your transcript, and then letters of recommendation. You usually need 3 of those. If you haven't already, I would start talking to people to get those lined up, because a lot of applications are due at the end of November or in December. And you want to give your reviewers plenty of time. If you have questions about, who should I be asking to be my letters of rec people, we're happy to answer such questions in the panel part. Okay.
One thing I want to add real quick, Ross. So for the transcript, I think you all are probably familiar with like the unofficial ones and also the official ones. So make sure you read properly whether they want the official or the unofficial ones, because the unofficial one is pretty easy to grab, to download from the website. But the official one, sometimes some universities are kind of strict and they want it to be shipped or sent from the department, not you. And that takes like maybe like a day or two. But if you're like at the end of the application, that may affect your planning.
I'll just add really quickly too, it's really, really important at this stage to follow the instructions and to stick to the page limits. That's one of the first things. I think I'm the furthest along in my career, so I'm starting to be on the other side of this process as well in recruiting students and joining faculty. And so worst case scenario, your application will get fully kicked out if you don't follow the rules. But even best case scenario, it just doesn't look good. One of the first things we're looking for in recruiting students is someone who can follow instructions. So really read the calls and the applications when you're doing this part.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, so let's talk about the typical structure of a statement of purpose. And again, I want to emphasize the BE Communication Lab that has a great workshop on this that this is adapted from. And I see that ICE has now put a link into some of the MIT BE resources, which are awesome. And yes, I am saying that as a biased person that was in that department. Okay, so in general, we're going to talk about a 2-page statement, which is the most common, and the things that go into it. As you can see, we've sort of sectioned this off in terms of the typical amount of space that you want to partition to different aspects of the application, but these can definitely vary from application to application, and some of these can merge together a bit. So you're going to want to start off with some kind of attention-getting introduction. It doesn't need to be a sob story. This is a very common question. You don't need to have had, your mom die of cancer in order to be interested in cancer research, but you should be able to get across what motivates you. Are you curious? Do you really like engineering? Are there these sorts of medical problems? Do you have some personal story that connects you to your science? So give us an idea of why you want to do science, why you want to go to grad school. It's no small choice to do a PhD, right? And so what they want to see is that somebody is properly motivated to come in and spend 5 to 6 years of their life doing something. And then you want to give a summary of sort of your overall statement of where you're going and where you're interested. Next will be the section where you talk about your relevant experiences. So what research questions have you asked and pursued so far as an undergraduate or a master's student or a postdoctoral scholar, or whatever your experiences have been so far? Talk about what they are, why you did them, what work you specifically did, what skills you developed along the way, and importantly, how this research experience has changed your sort of perspective over time and have led to you at the current moment and your interests moving forward, especially if you can target that towards a certain program. So like for me, I started off doing work that was in like DNA damage and repair because I thought aging and cancer were interesting. And then that morphed over time into being interested in synthetic biology. I did synthetic biology in grad school, but I had no synthetic biology interest or experience as an undergraduate. And that's okay. People change all the time. But what I had to get across in my statement was how those interests evolved and sort of carved out a path for me. Next, you'll be getting into more specific paragraphs, and this will be our, we'll show you examples of in the FIT activity later in the breakout session. So you want to be very explicit and name names. Which professors in the department are you interested to work with and why? And this should connect to sort of your motivation to do science and like your career goals. How can they get you there? This kind of blends in with the future part of the statement, which is sort of like, where do you want to go? How will the program get you there? How will maybe the labs get you there? So for example, if you're really interested in translational science and you want to start a company and you say that you want to join a lab that has started a lot of companies, then you can sort of make that connection. If so try to make a connection. You don't for sure have to know. You can say you're open. You're still thinking about, some people are like me, are postdocs and still like, should I stay in academia or not? So obviously as like an undergraduate or whatever you are right now, you don't need to know for sure what you're doing in your career. But they want to see that you're thinking about it and that you have a good reason to go to grad school. So, ideally you would want to do research in the future, but a PhD can be a stepping stone to many careers. And so even if you're interested in going into like science policy or something, you can mention like sort of some of these diverse interests.
Real quick, I'll just add for the FIT section that along with naming specific professors, it can be great to talk about specific research institutes or even student organizations at that school, because that shows that you've done more than just Googling a list of good programs to go to, and you're actually interested in the broader environment at the university and you've thought about that.
Yeah, and especially if they have like a personal statement or diversity statement, we can put a plug for, that's also a great place to look at initiatives that exist at the current university, clubs, whatever it is that you would potentially want to get involved in, and do some leadership. They like to see that kind of initiative, so check it out. And if you're interested in like entrepreneurship or something like that, you can look at what centers they have, what support services. You can put that here, or you can put that in like a personal statement. It kind of depends on the flow of things. But yeah, thanks, Gianna, for pointing that out. There's a lot of things besides just purely the research labs that can make you want to go to a school. Okay, so let's go through some of the common mistakes. And guys, also feel free to pitch in anything else that you want to add here, because there's many things that can potentially go wrong. So I would say for the intro, a common thing I see here is that it's maybe overly long or overly detailed. Just try to keep it simple. Like tell us real quick, like what's your motivation, and then where do you want to go, and then kind of get into the rest. if this is like half a page of setting up a dramatic story about why you want to go to grad school, then people are just kind of going to skim through it probably. A typical problem for the relevant research experiences is people kind of just listing experiences, which we call like CV in paragraph form. So they have your curriculum vitae, they can see all of the various projects that you did. You don't actually need to touch on every single thing that you've done that's a research project or whatever in your current time. Focus on the most important ones to you and ones that sort of took you from A to B. Also tell them why you did things, what you learned from them, stuff that's not going to show up on a CV, especially if it's relevant for their specific program. You also don't want to get lost in technical details of any research that you did. So it's more important to talk about like what the problems were, what you specifically did. You don't have to describe in exhaustive detail the whole research program. You know, very simply say like, this is the problem, this is what I did. You can mention specific protocols if it's essential, but you know, you don't have, this isn't like a research paper where you're like writing out all the technical detail. It's kind of walking through somebody in a semi-conversational style, what you did and why it was important and what you learned from it. Okay, and then the last thing for this part is not connecting it to the program at all. So if you're kind of juggling like, oh, what do I include, what do I not include? And you're applying to places that, you know, maybe in one place you're thinking about systems biology and somewhere else you're thinking about synthetic biology, you can maybe pick and choose your experiences that will kind of align one way or the other. We know that students coming in have not necessarily set themselves onto their research path, and it's okay to have diverse interests, but a little bit of tailoring and like putting in nibbles of, you know, how something is pushing you towards a strength of a program that you're applying to in terms of like general research areas can be good and helpful. For the fit part, a common mistake is that you're missing detail. And so we'll see this in one of the examples today. So make sure you're, like we said, naming names, justifying your interest in the school. You know, if you're having a hard time articulating why you want to go to a program because you're not seeing a lot of labs there that you're interested in, then it's probably the case that you shouldn't apply there, and that will come across in the statement. If there's seeing your dripping enthusiasm to join multiple labs there, then that's probably a good sign from the reader's perspective that you would be a good fit there because you could potentially join multiple groups. So you kind of can help to think about it from the reviewer's perspective there. And then finally, for the future part, try not to be too vague or generic about it. PhD is a big commitment, so they need to see that you're taking this seriously. You don't want to say like, and in the future, I will do research, right? It would be kind of like, okay, so what? So try to be a little bit, try to articulate a little bit like, you know, if you see a potential couple of different paths, explain those and how their program can get you there. Okay, are there any other tidbits from the rest of the panel?
I'll hop in real quick. So a really good way to look at this is not like, I need to fill out a bunch of applications and hopefully somebody takes me. That works for other parts of life, but I think PhD, it is worth the time and the energy to, you know, figure out what's going to work for you because you are investing a ton of time and a ton of lost income ultimately into this process. So it is to try to get into a school, but it's also to try to get your own needs met. So as you're writing this, that's just a really good thing to like put on a Post-it note and put on top of the application physically on your computer. Like, what do I need out of a program? Is this school giving me, will this school give me what I need?
Yeah, I want to echo that a bit. Like to be specific on the fitting. Let's say that you have your dream school. You really want to go to school X, and that was like your plan since, you know, high school or whatever. But when you're looking at it seriously and you can't really fill more than 2 labs that you wanna work with, that would make it very difficult for the department to bring you in, because like sometimes the people you want to work with may not have the space or the funding for you to join in that year. So the good things for these kind of like bidding process is to make sure that you're you can adapt to different choices, but you have broad interest in not just one specific lab, but at least two or three. So if you figure it out when you're writing or applying to a certain place and you cannot, add more than two places, I think that might give you some kind of like reflection that that may not be the right place for you, at least for this round of the application.
Yeah, just to take it one step further too, and really reiterate what was said, graduate school is not for everybody. It is not something to jump into because you don't know what to do with your degree. It's not, it should not be plan B if you didn't get into medical school. Graduate school is very, very hard. A lot of statistics show that 3 out of 5 doctoral students will have significant mental health struggles, both chronic and acute. So when you're thinking about these applications, that's not to discourage anybody. It's just don't jump into graduate school if you don't know what else to do. And when doing this, you're going to come back to your why or your compass of why did I want to go to graduate school a lot. So if you're struggling with your intro, it's worth it to take some time and maybe talk to a counselor or a therapist or a friend and really talk through, why do I want to go to graduate school? What is my goal here, my focus here? Because I think all of us on this panel will tell you that we faced a lot of failure and we faced a lot of times where we wanted to quit. And so while this is an exercise in trying to get into graduate school, it also helps you develop some of the skills that you will need during graduate school as well. And the admittance committee will be looking for that in this document. And then be brief. I'll underscore that. If you are lengthy, that is like the cardinal sin as I talk on and on and on. But you want, if there's an application that comes in that really eloquently and has really nailed what they want to say, that really stands out to the committee. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Okay, so we're going to get into an activity about messages in your statement. And so sort of boiled it down here to a few key messages that you want to get across when you're writing these statements. And I think that Kaitlin's what you just said is really like nicely sets this up. You want them to sort of read your 2 pages or all the documents that you provide and come away with like a really clear picture of you and what you want to do. Why do you want to go to graduate school? What do you want to research? And how will the program get you there? If it's suffused with too much detail and all these things that we talked about as common problems, then you can lose the message. And so you want to make sure that these are clear and that they're sort of perfused throughout your statement. And so in our breakout session today, we're going to go through an activity to help you think about how to perfuse these messages in your statement. So if you have a piece of paper around, or you can pull up an Excel sheet or something on your computers, we want you to sort of recreate this grid. And I realize I'll leave it up for like a few minutes as we talk through the plan here to give people a moment. Or maybe I'll screenshot it or something and put it into the chat. Let's see if we can do some interesting things here. Oh yeah, it worked. Sweet. Okay, yeah, so that's in the chat now. So you can copy that, you can do whatever. But in the breakout session, we're gonna split off, and then you're gonna try and fill this in with just quick bullet points. And you're not necessarily going to fill out every square, but the goal of the exercise is to help you think about like how this information gets filtered through. So, the intro is like the clearest place where you would introduce why you want to go to graduate school. But as we mentioned before, when you talk about your experiences doing research, that should motivate that bit too. So what you want to think about is like specific maybe like, bullet points, something that you could later like paste in as like a topic sentence or like a direct sentence into your statement, or that sort of like refers to some experiences that you have or so on. And so ideally, like once you fill this out, then you can go into your statements that you're writing and then help to use this to kind of outline your statement and build it up. Does that make sense? Well, I guess to the class. Okay. Maybe I'll give like 1 second for questions because I think we have plenty of time. But you'll also be able to ask your sort of breakout session leader questions if you have them. Okay. So the next activity after that will be looking at some examples of the fit paragraphs. And it will be sort of, we'll show you an example and then we'll go through and talk about what's good and not good. And then after that, we'll have a couple of wrap-up slides. So, okay, I'll leave this here and then I'll see if I can generate the breakout rooms and automatically split people up. And I guess we'll just take like a approximately even number of people each. Okay. Okay, in the meantime, if you still haven't, make this grid for yourself as I like split people up into the breakout rooms. Okay, sweet. I've been having some audio issues here and there. Okay, well, hopefully everyone had a nice breakout session. So now we're gonna have a couple just up slides, and then we'll drop some resources into the chat, and then we'll stick around to answer any more questions that you guys have here in the sort of panel session. So just give me a moment to get that set up. Okay, so these last slides are pretty much just about some tips and some helpful resources. So one is that if you're kind of early into this process, or even if you're not and you haven't, I would recommend making a spreadsheet or something to keep track of all of the different programs, deadlines, application components, and so on. We would definitely recommend to weight programs that you're going to apply to based on the labs that you're interested in that are there, as opposed to like the, US Today or whatever rankings of different institutions. You want to go somewhere where there's multiple labs that you're interested in, ideally, not just one. So that can help your weighting. If, there's an institution that has like 5 labs you could see yourself being in, definitely weight that over something where there's just one, because if it doesn't work out with that one lab, then you're probably not going to be too happy. So give yourself many opportunities to succeed in whatever program you join, and try to prioritize schools that are going to sort of have many opportunities for you, especially if they have strengths in multiple research areas that you're interested in. There's a bunch of resources. I'm going to like paste these into the chat, so you don't need to try to write these down, but we already mentioned BE Application Assistance Program. The MIT Communication Lab also has a lot of other good resources in general. There's a Caltech slide deck about statements of purposes that we'll provide a link to. And also there's a great website called Advice to a Scientist, where there's many sorts of like essays and resources written by scientists sort of helping out other scientists at every career stage, including like undergrad, grad students, and beyond. So we'll provide a link to that. And so now we'll just open it up, and for the last like 15-20 minutes here, we'll just answer any more questions from the audience as a panel. So feel free to either put it in the chat if you have a question, or to open your mic or raise your hand, and we'll moderate. Drew? Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going? I had a quick question about I think just what professors or admissions committees expect from PhD applicants to ask themselves before applying, in terms of why like they want to do research. I think like in terms of what I am like why I'm trying to do that is obviously like the curiosity to learn about those specific like biological mechanisms, but I think expanding further on that is a little difficult for me personally. So any thoughts and about how I can go about that?
Maybe we can be a little bit Socratic. So when you say like you're driven by curiosity, I think that a lot of scientists are, so that's great. So what, I guess, makes you interested in like, you know, a more in-depth research experience, right? So as like an undergraduate or you have some degree of research experience, right? But what sort of motivates you to do 5 or 6 more years of intense research?
Yeah. To answer that, I would say some of the experiences that I've had as an undergrad in a lab or both designing experiments or even just handling, say, mice or flies or bacteria, each of it has been like an interesting experience where I've learned a lot more than I knew before coming in. And just seeing like the expanse of how much there is to learn and like actually being able to hypothesize and actually see something go right. Well, in a PhD, it might just go all wrong often, but it's okay. But I think just dealing with that and like adapting would be something.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's something that you can talk about in like your experiences part, right? So you can start off in like the intro about curiosity. And then as you go through and talk about your experiences, you can say what you said, where, you know, like that continuous sort of like building and learning new things. And uh, it goes with the curiosity thing, right? If you just love to like learn new things and like the process of research allows you to keep learning, then I think that that can come off very genuinely.
Okay, great. I just wanted to know if that is sufficient, like the curiosity, or should you have more motivations, like in terms of like the overall like global health outcomes and all of that. Like obviously that comes with it, like with biology research, but in terms of how it connects, like is that something really important?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kaitlin, I'll just let Kaitlin talk actually,
I
because
mean, you can go first too. What you're
no,
saying.
go for it.
Great.
Go
I
for
was
it.
just gonna chime in too that you know, my why for why I do research is because I want to make a difference. And so my purpose statement still is to this day the same sort of thing that I did in graduate school is that, you know, I grew up in a very rural, a very farming community where I didn't have access to science and I didn't have access to, you know, literally the internet or like a lot of, you know, the things. So in high school biology, when my teacher sent me to the library with a college genetics textbook, I fell in love. And that was a really formative moment for me in my career. That's sort of my origin story. There's nothing wrong with that being your why and that being, you know, where your story starts in science. You know, it's okay. I don't know, to be less dramatic. I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's okay for it to not be, you know, somebody very near and dear to me died of cancer. It's okay for it to be a little bit less tuned and to just be this lower and slower sort of a burn than I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm trying to get over my COVID-19 vaccine, so my brain might not work either. But does that help at all? It's okay to be
To not
brief.
be as dramatic
Yeah.
as, yeah.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you mentioned things like global health if you're applying to engineering, they definitely want to see that you're thinking about problems in the world. So if there's some problems that really sort of are like closer to your interests, like you mentioned global health, then I would definitely mention that somewhere, but it doesn't have to be like the first thing. You don't have to list off statistics of how many people are dying of X disease. You can start with your curiosity, and then even later on in the statement, you can talk about how like this is an area you'd like to make an impact in. And that probably connects to the school and labs that you mentioned, right? So it can sort of come off in the parts where you're saying like, I'm interested in this lab because I like that they're focusing on this area. That's like, you know, I'd like to be able to make an impact there in addition to learning about this, you know, type of research. But yeah, it's a great question. It's always like a kind of each individual to each individual. Okay, I see there's some in the chat, and then we will get to Nathan's question. So Drayton asked, how would you recommend adapting the SOP outline for shorter statements, personal statements and or research statements? I'll let somebody else answer.
I can try again. So this is something that we all, really struggle with, and it just takes a lot of iteration and a lot of feedback. So don't be afraid. You know, we talk in my lab a lot about the first draft, and the first experiments are the first pancake, where they're gonna be a mistake. They're not gonna be great. Their whole purpose is to be the first one and to be what you edit moving forward. So tell me what you want to tell me, and then tell me why you're telling it, and tell it to me in the most brief and basic and fundamental way that you can, would be my suggestion.
Okay, I don't really have anything to add.
Yeah, I guess just to emphasize that, like, I still do that on my assistant professor applications. I still do it on my grants of, like, the first drafts are terrible. They're horrible. But their purpose is you grow while you do it. So this will likely take you more time than you expect. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also like
and I think that
the peer review will help as well.
No, sorry, Ice, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if my voice go through. I just want to emphasize again that the peer review process is going to help. Like you have friends that can help look at your writings, and they can like give some feedback whether like they understand what you're trying to convey or not. Because sometimes you're trying to go too far. We're trying to be very artistic at what we're saying. Sometimes that just like make it harder for people to understand. There's there's some balance between being direct and concise, and also being outstanding, like using some kind of unique sentence and paragraph to make sure that you stand out on the rules and that.
Yeah, and to extend a little bit on what Ice is saying, remember the messages, right? Like, why do you want to go to school? What do you want to do? And how is the program going to get you there, right? And that probably means for a shorter statement, you're going to have to cut out a lot of things and like really focus on your story. And so you're not going to be able to be, you know, maybe as like rigorous in talking about all the cool science you did, but they also have your CV and letters of references, right? And you can have the professors or postdocs or whatever that you worked with talk more about like what you did in the lab there, you know, so that can still come across, but it doesn't have to come across necessarily in your statement.
Yeah, you can kind of think about it, to throw another metaphor at you. Compare like a movie or a short film to a preview of what can you show the committee so that they want to invite you for the interview, or they want to invite you to come visit. What would hook them into seeing, you know, instead of the 2 or 3 minute preview for the movie, what would hook them into the full one? What do you need to distill it down to?
Okay, so the next one is from Kirtana, and I see Ice has already somewhat answered this. But I think it might be good to just like mention it for the whole crowd. So Kirtana asks, how would program fit depend for an international student? And you've heard that people from programs with a lot of like NIH funding are less able to take international students. I think Ice, if you want to build off your answer and talk more generally about like the international student experience.
Yeah. So what I want to emphasize here is that, like, the faculty and everyone in the research lab is looking for people who fit. So sometimes there are some other regulations that was beyond the PI. For example, the the tuition fee for international students is usually either equal to the local student or more expensive. So that means, like, if you're looking for someone who is, like, a great fit to the lab, they will have to make sure that they really fit in. Otherwise, like, they may be a little hesitant to pay 50% more of the tuition for the students, something like that. And that applies to not just the lab, but also for the department. Um, so that would be my, simple or general answer to this kind of question. And I would say it's not really specific to the NIH. It's more about, the regular kind of like um, state law that kind of apply to most of the states here in the US. But again, like, bottom line is that, like, if you're great fit, your PI will invest.
Yeah. And Kirtana's other question was about transitioning fields. Was anybody on our panel from a different field than the one that they're currently working in and want to talk about that transition? I'm bioengineering all the way, so not a helpful person in this regard.
Yeah, I did chemistry, and then I do enzymology, and then I do microbiology. So most of the time, people will appreciate if you bring in new kind of expertise and new kind of knowledge, and especially if they are looking for, someone to fill in the gap, or if they are looking for, an expansion to the new kind of field. If you bring in new expertise, I think that's something that will be a great fit to the statement.
I'll also add to that. I switched research. I stayed within biomedical engineering, but I switched research focuses from undergrad to grad school. And honestly, a lot of the underlying things that you need for research are the exact same, no matter what you're doing. Like this drive to have the curiosity to ask interesting questions and the perseverance to be able to take that whole project through and finish it out and see how it goes. Like those things are just central across whatever you're studying. And so I think you can also help highlight those things that you learn from the other field and then talk about why you're really excited about this new field.
Yeah, to build on that, just talk about, I learned how to do pipetting. I learned how to do mouse work or how to read the literature and derive a protocol. Like those are things that are really fundamental and really translate and can be a really benefit to come in. It's far more common than you think. You just happen to pull kind of a panel that we've all, I think that too shows that synthetic biology and engineering biology is very broad and very multidisciplinary as well. I know that I personally pull from biochemistry to cell and molecular biology to immunology to cancer biology to, it goes on and on and on. So I think that this is one of the more unique fields that we are inherently interdisciplinary. So it's much more common and much more welcomed.
Yeah, they definitely want people that are coming from different backgrounds. And you mentioned coming from physics. I think in general, it's a little bit easier to go from like physics and like that, maybe, I don't want to call it like harder science, but like more like math heavy type things towards biology than it is to go the other way around, because you have good fundamentals in like modeling and things like that that are very applicable to doing like biomedical engineering type research. Whereas it can often be hard for people coming from like a more purely biology background to learn like differential equations and stuff like that because they might not have that kind of foundation. But it does mean that you'll have to do a little bit of catch up if you haven't taken a ton of biology classes, which means you also might have an opportunity in your like upcoming semester to take some foundational biology classes if you haven't already. So those are some things to consider is like, you know, you can line up your last semester or quarter or whatever your system is to like help fill in some of the gaps and provide yourself some of the fundamentals that you'll need for a field transition. Okay, I think, so Nathan, you had a question, right?
Never mind, it's all good. It was already answered.
Okay, great.
I think Wanji, there's a question at the end of that statement.
Yes, I already typed that in the group chat. It's a bit long because it has a quotation from the MIT bioengineering application system. I just enter the application system. Yes, I have read the instructions from the department website, and I feel it's just a kind of a unexpected SOP as what we discussed in this meeting. But after seeing this prompt, I feel a bit confusing. The prompt says something like the statement could be much like a proposal for graduate studies, like you need to set forth the issue and problem you wish to address. So I feel right. It sounds a bit strange. Yeah.
Yeah, the way I see this is more like in the fit and like school specific aspects. The whole thing doesn't need to be like, here's the project I want to do, like you would write for a fellowship.
I feel for sure they won't expect me as a senior undergraduate student to write an NIH proposal or something, right?
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that
I
would
feel
be
okay.
super unreasonable.
Yeah.
You to
I
do.
think-
So
Yeah,
I would interpret it more broadly. I think of like, you know,
Okay.
you want to solve human disease, you want to solve, you know,
Yeah.
hunger and
Okay.
resource shortage
I see.
things. I that's how I would interpret that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for this one, I think it's more about the wording is the proposal for graduate studies, right? So
Yeah.
learning what A is or figuring out what B is. That's the
Okay.
proposal for the studies. It doesn't have to
Okay.
be a full research project.
Project
Yeah.
proposal. Okay. I see.
Yeah, I think that's a wording that the
Yeah.
department or each department are looking for, but they don't have to be the same kind of what you are familiar with that kind of proposal before. So I think
Okay.
this is a good example of like looking at the differences of the description of what each department were providing. I think like
Yeah.
each department will have their own kind of description, and
Yes.
despite most of them will be in a pretty similar kind of like taking into account these kind of specifics would benefit you when you're applying for each department, of course.
Okay. I see it. Thank you. Yeah, I also attended the webinar hosted by MIT BE department, and I just found that they really emphasize why this program. So I feel maybe here, yeah, I agree with your interpretation of the wording proposal. Maybe it just means the why, just means your motivation to join MIT. Okay, I think this doesn't mean a research project proposal or something. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yes, and that's true for anywhere, not just MIT.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're pitching yourself, right? I think they're just trying to like really like set that into the applicant's minds that you're not just kind of like generally writing like, you know, this is what I did, blah, blah, blah. It's like, why do I want to go to grad school? And they're looking for people that are very serious about that.
Okay.
And
thank you.
of course. Okay, so it's 3:31. So I think we'll wrap it up there. So thanks again to the panel. Thanks for everyone that came and participated. We hope that this has been helpful to you. This has been a production of the Engineering Biology Research Consortium Student and Postdoc Association. if and when you become a graduate student, if you're not already a master's student, check us out, come join, even if you're just doing rotations and you haven't joined a lab yet. If you're interested in synthetic biology or anything adjacent to it, then you can join our community. You can do outreach like this. You can participate with the rest of the community. There's a lot of events that we put on for grad students to, you know, provide professional development opportunities and talk about things like biosecurity and other cool things. So definitely check us out. And, you know, if you're on the Slack, we're happy to answer more questions in there as well in the future SPA channel. So we'll wrap it up there, and I'll be sticking around a little bit longer if anybody has specific questions about their proposals. But we'll end the recording and say thanks and bye one more time.
Thanks a lot for coming, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
I can stick around for probably like 15 to 30 minutes, Ross.